Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Hello, all. Welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with you. And I want to remind you, as always, that this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This does not constitute working with a licensed mental health professional, let alone the subjects that we talk about here. But let them be helpful guides for your experience in finding a therapist or mental health professional in your area. So today's podcast, this is another individual that I've come to know and through certain social circles, which we'll talk about later on. But I thought their work is something that it would be good for everyone to hear. And also their work, especially working with an organization that I have peripherally known as Black Brothers Esteem in San Francisco, is a very prime one. Talking about LGBT mental health, especially for Black men. So today's podcast guest is Brain Ragas, who is an accomplished administrator with 10 years of experience raising awareness and engagement of health and human rights issues with community-based organizations. Based in San Francisco Bay Area, he brings strong management and leadership skills with an exciting track record of improving organizational efficiency through strategic engagement and community partnerships. And I know that sounds like a job ad there, but I'm sure there's more than they can add to that. If he's looking for more work, consider this
sure, why not?
The lookout for that. And welcome to Untying Knots, Brian.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks for having me here. I'm very excited.
Not a problem. So how did you get here?
Sure. So I am a local Bay Area native. I have my educational background is actually in comparative ethnic studies that I went to at San Francisco State. But from there, I actually found myself really directly getting into community-based health. Just because they're so synergistic, right, with working with concepts of community building within communities of color. And then really trying to address really pertinent health needs that affect our communities, right? So I actually started off working with an organization called, at the time, API Wellness Center, just volunteering, and just wanting to get involved, trying to find my sense of community. Disclosure, I'm half Filipino and Black. So that's why I think I'm growing up in San Francisco, right? It's about 40% API. And so, I was trying to find, my sense of community there. And so I just started volunteering, getting involved in community work. And, it led me to actually starting to get work through that experience, right? And so I started to do more work. And actually subsequently after that, I started doing more work in the East Bay, doing like HIV testing, capacity building, and even research with folks affected by HIV, and the slew of health determinants that come along with working with our low income BIPOC communities here. And so that kind of led me to where I am today, and I'm still expanding and learning to where that may take me in the future. I'm studying I studied in South Africa a few years ago, and now I'm at the University of London. So I've actually wanted more branch into global health into the future as well. So
very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. And I think you definitely can spend some time talking with our brother Johnny, or well, I should say, your soon-to-be brother, Johnny.
Yeah.
Because part of how we know each other is through Onyx itself.
Yes.
You're currently one of our pledges. Although by the time this airs, you probably will have finished our pledge process.
Yes.
But to that extent, your work in these programs, can you give us a bit more about what the program you're presently working with does, and how is it something that the impact and support that it generates for the community?
Definitely. So I'm currently the director of Black Health at San Francisco AIDS Foundation, and it actually has a portfolio of programs dedicated to serving Black queer communities here in San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco. So one of them is also called Trans Life, which
Mm-hmm.
sees trans and gender nonconforming folks all along the spectrum, supporting through social support groups, case management, and events and activities that we do throughout the city. And then
Mm-hmm.
we also have a capacity building program that is a employment kind of like pipeline into public
Mm-hmm.
health. And so we're starting building and training young folks, young Black queer folks in service navigation, phlebotomy, um, and case management, actually, to
Mm-hmm.
get into the workforce over here. Um, and then, of course, we have Black Brothers Esteem, which is our legacy program here at the agency. We're celebrating our 27th year here, and it's dedicated to Black queer men in the city and San Francisco, in the Bay Area. And then, again, it's just a safe space where we provide social support space. We do events and activities. We do some case management and referrals out to whatever direct services, whatever health services that they need. Yeah.
Very nice. I guess one of those questions that sort of comes up, one might ask, is given the elements of queer support and so forth that exist, why is there a need for a program that is specifically focused more towards Black men?
hmm Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting question. I think particularly to ask in, today's day and age, particularly in a city like San Francisco, right? And if we
Mm-hmm.
look at San Francisco's numbers, right, San Francisco is like currently less than 10% Black or African American,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's slowly diminishing, right? However, if you take a look at the steps of our homeless population and who our homeless populations are, you'll see the highest percentage of folks are Black African American. So if you're looking at that context, seeing who's actually here, what types of Black folks are, they're mostly poor, are obviously low income, um, homeless, marginally housed here, in San Francisco. And then, of course, a good number of them are also queer and trans as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so we provide health services. We are the safety net of the safety net in some ways to where, folks can get basic needs like housing, healthcare, food, and I think more important, and importantly, just a social space too, where folks can just hang out and get to know each other and really build community, you know. And so, that's part of like how our program is still existing today. And I think what's most important to what we're trying to really address is the needs of our community.
And what are some of the other needs that you're finding in the community needing to be reached that we can look forward to trying in the future?
Yeah, I think I mean, 'cause, we primarily do our work through support groups and social spaces. So I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a very clear need. I think, for social support and space. I think it's, it's a bit hard, being Black and queer in San Francisco and the Bay Area, right? You know, um, like I said, with the numbers that I just said earlier, it's hard to find space. It's hard to find affirming space where folks
Mm-hmm.
can really build community and see themselves reflected and talk about the issues. I think that's really pertinent, to us as Black queer men, right? And so we provide that space. We give topics, discussion. We do discussion groups. We do and how we do that through a book reading group that we have, which is amazing. It's called Brothers Who Read, and
Mm-hmm.
we read Black queer literature and discuss the major themes out of that. Um, and interesting to also invite the authors to come and speak with us as well too, which is really fun and amazing. I love when we get that level of participation.
Which,
Uh,
if I
and,
remember
and
correctly, you had that a couple of, I think it was last month that you
yeah,
had I remember you seeing the post on it. My schedule just living in the South Bay versus going to San Francisco, despite what it looks like on the calendar, it's at least an hour's drive.
yes, 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 yes. No worries. Um, but no, I think what's important with that, is we also bring our work out into the larger community as well too. So we we have a good cohort of folks, of regular participants within the space. But we're always constantly trying to engage, the larger community with the work that we do and the services that we provide. And a lot of that is through, event-based things, right? So like we had a book launch the other day with one of the authors that we were working with for those who read. We do, a regular holiday stuff. Like Kwanzaa is huge here with us. So, and of course, like Black History Month, we do a big a community event called Generations, which is a celebration of Black, queer, LGBTIQQ history with performances and big events, things like that. So we're very big on having fun. I'll say that. It's a fun process. We do a lot of amazing and fun stuff here.
Very nice. So I'll let you get a drink in there. Before I hit you with one of those questions that's not on our original discussion list, which one of those aspects being the material you talked about being providing with the sense of community, I'm curious, what if you, and even with the standpoint of the population base, I'm kind of wondering, what have you found about our wealth and generational gaps?
Yeah, no, that's an amazing
culture?
question. That's an amazing question. No, I love it. I think also particularly I should mention because our organization, our group, started again like 27 years ago. It's kind of been the same folks too. So if we have a generational like component to us, is that most of our participants are probably about 40 to 45 and up. I'll say that. And so and a lot of folks have mixed status, right? So some are HIV positive, some are not, and so some are living with HIV for a long time, and so we're trying to partly address some of the generational needs of Black queer seniors in some ways, right? Which is fascinating, and I didn't feel like I'd ever find myself doing that kind of work, but I am, and it's interesting. It's really interesting to see the needs of what it looks like to be Black, queer, and aging, right? Because someday I'll be there too.
Oh yeah,
all of us will be there. We'll all be there, right? We'll all be there. So I'm getting that look on what it needs, and surprisingly, it's not as different as working with younger folks. Older folks, too. They require socializing. They require space. They require, a lot of the same things I think younger folks need, which is, that peer-based support, that peer-based look at like, what does it mean to be, finding that sense of community again along the age lines as well too. So, we have folks who come. I mean, part of our service delivery is teaming up with like ALRP and like how to build out your end of life work and contract, end of life work, right? You're making sure your things are settled. Like we're doing a lot of those kinds of sets of workshops for folks, and and how to have that conversation, with each other, right? So that folks are, financially or life set, towards the end of their life, right?
Very nice.
But at the same time, they're also really just fun and catty, like young folks too. They talk up the storm, right? They do, which is I think really fun to see, right? And there's so much like history, I think, within the space as well too, that I think that maybe a lot of younger folks, like myself, also just really take to heart. Like one of our clients, he like knew like Essex Hemphill, right? And he was like having lunch with him, and like he said he hit on him once, and I was like, what? He's like one of the poets and Black queer big figureheads that I've only read in books, but you have like this lived experience like with this person, which just is fascinating and amazing. So I think there's a really rich history when we're talking about generational community building, right? Because older folks are just as much as part of our community as like younger folks, right?
Oh yeah. Well, and especially there also becomes that aspect of how do we talk about not just only Black history but queer history and how those in us intersects versus it being just this one topic or siloed into these other areas. And equally, just as I mentioned that aspect of the generational gap, but it's like we've also got our own issues with the generational wealth gap too.
Yes, there's a wealth gap. So, which I not want to talk about, and it's very interesting to see again in San Francisco, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think as my position, as a director of Black Health, I'm trying to reach all aspects of the Black community, right? And with the
Mm-hmm.
demographics I just talked about earlier, right? A good majority of it is low income here, but there's also a good number of higher income Black queer folks here as well too, right? Who work in tech or who just recently arrived for work. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a good number of those folks here too that also kind of want different forms of connection, and also need health resources as well too, right? They go to I mean, we have a pinnacle spot of sexual health and PrEP and DoxyPep and all that stuff here in the Castro through our
Mm-hmm.
clinical stuff at Strut, right? And so we get those, and we also have art programs as well too, which also really attract those folks of higher income, right? And so it's
Mm-hmm.
a really interesting space that I have to navigate to bring in those different areas of 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 income
Mm-hmm.
right. So as an example was that book event that I launched, right, that we had. And so we had I mean, because it's a story about
Mm-hmm.
young up and comers, young Black folks who are trying to be upwardly mobile, and try to navigate dating and sex and all that kind of stuff, right? Which all audiences read, well, both lower income and higher income, right here in the city. And so we brought those elements together at our space in the Castro, of all places, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was just really interesting to see. Like, so we had our folks on one side, and then we had like these newer folks come in, but it brought in all great conversation, I think, to address all different aspects of what it means to be Black and queer, like in a space, right? So yeah, it was a really fascinating look while I was observing the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, we have such an unique experience, I think, here living in San Francisco and in the Bay Area when it comes to like Black queer life and like what that means, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is one of those places where, again, a lot of people don't think of that intersectionality and what that means,
Hmm.
and also about the choices that one has to make in that situation,
Hmm.
from the financial to the health
You
to
know,
just the sense of what is our community.
what is our community and what they feel, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to find that sense of community. It's hard to find that valid sense of community, right? Because like I said, we had our events in the Castro, right, which
Mm-hmm.
hasn't been historically very nice to Black folks,
Mm-hmm.
outrightly racist and hurtful to Black folks as well as trans folks, so it's not an affirming space. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, once we gather folks together, once we know we're poignant, we can make our own spaces, where and when we can, you know.
Mm-hmm. So you just talked a bit about, and when I asked you how'd you get here, your story of getting into this work. But if somebody else, and especially to our younger groups who might be listening or who wants to do a career change, what does it take to start getting into work like this?
Yeah. No, I think it's really knowing, I think, where you come from and what communities that you're involved in with. And I think really looking at the history,
Mm-hmm.
the development, of those communities, and looking at the needs of those communities and how to really address them. So again, I can't emphasize enough. I come from an ethnic studies background, and there are many ways that you can, I think, get that knowledge, not
Mm-hmm.
just within, a four-year university, you know, but I would really highly recommend, I think, folks who really want to do this work, who really want to work with communities of color, who really want to work with Black folks, and particularly, you have to know like our history. Have to
Mm-hmm.
know like where we come from. You have to know our struggles. Have to know our triumphs, right? I think to really get a sense of, you know, where we can go, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
which is which is the sky, right? I don't want to keep seeing us reinvent the wheel, or I don't want to see us, try strategies that have been done before. So let's get that education, let's get that knowledge of what has come before us to
Mm-hmm.
move us forward. and then get that experience too. So I think in the Bay Area, I think we're very lucky to have, a myriad of community-based organizations doing amazing work with our communities. The Bay Area is such a progressive bubble, which I always like to say, that are filled with well-meaning folks who want to genuinely make our communities better. And so I think just linking up with them and learning on the ground, I think is just most valuable.
Very nice. And just the aspect, you don't have to just have a public health degree to be able to do this work. Coming from ethnic studies.
I don't. I didn't. I kind of fell myself into it. I really did. I did not think I'd be working in public health. I thought I'd be a teacher or an educator or not that some realm of that, but
So with the community support and structures you're just putting there, I'm also curious, as with my field, how are you incorporating mental health into the work that goes on in your program? And that also, I know it seems like a strange segue from how do you get into this work, but bringing that into perspective and in step with what you're already providing.
Yeah. I think one of the first steps to take is to really destigmatize mental health and normalize conversations around mental health. I think it's one of the first key areas. And that can look like in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different realms. It's like, how are you feeling? It's like just checking in with folks, I think on an individual basis, right? Those are, key aspects to mental health that we can all take, right? It doesn't require necessarily going to a mental health provider, but what we can do as a community is really come together and just check in with folks, how you doing? This, I think, American individualistic capitalist society always teaches us that we have to solve, our own problems. But, what we're trying to reframe and change, I think, in community-based health is that we can take care of a lot with each other, right? So I think that's one step, or a step that we can all easily take as a community and as a society. And then two, also, which is also very, very important, is also see our mental health providers, right? So we should definitely have access, see them and have access to our professionally trained mental health providers, and behavioral health service providers that we definitely need more of in that sense, right? I personally am lucky to see my therapist bi-weekly. And it took a long time to find him, especially someone asterisk with someone who is also a person of color, someone who is also queer, all those things to make sure that there's proper representation, I think, along the spectrum, so that folks can have access, to mental health, right? So, I don't know how many. I mean, I don't want to speak for other people, but I feel, it's kind of been shown and proven that therapists of color, are make a profound impact on the communities that they're serving, just through the relatability factor, right?
Oh yes.
So
yeah, well, they're kind of sadly at that point. So I remember one client who, as I was talking to her, was telling me, and she was at that point, she had her career, she was working in a school, and she was really ready to speaking to some needs of a client and of her student that was clearly about racism, and everyone in the particular meeting she was at basically was shutting down everything she was saying, not paying attention to her. And as I watched her, steel herself, like she was not just back in that moment, but ready to defend it against me, my response was, "You're absolutely right. That was racist."
Yeah.
And just the relief that came across her was profound. And the fact that she could talk more about this and was being supported, as opposed to, was that really what happened kind of thing, Susan? It's like, no, it's like that happens to so many of us. So that's something that we definitely can provide as mental health providers, and having settings like what you provide with Black Brothers Esteem to help normalize that, and especially for Black queer men, because
Yes.
how many times have we been called crazy before because of our sexuality?
Right. Exactly. But yes, no, I definitely agree with you. Like we definitely need those culturally affirming providers to be here for us, to be for the community, right? And have access to those communities, right? So, lowering the barriers to mental health providers, I think is another step, another key factor of things that we need, right? So, whether that be, and increasing access to, health insurance or, getting funding again for our community-based health services to allocate for more, all the myriads of ways that we can work around our healthcare systems to make it a low barrier as possible, free or at cost or. So we'll see. Yeah, we can go on and on those ways.
Right. Oh,
But,
yes. But those are some of the key ones there. And some of this is because we're trying to deal with a system that was, again, never designed for some of us.
For us. It's not. But I mean, which I really love the community-based model, because again, we're really trying to make those, systems work for us, right? So, in community-based health, right, you'll never see anyone wearing like a white coat or anything like that. You'll never see, anyone, I don't know, like have a couch or like go through those like stereotypical ways of having counselors, right?
Hey, when you're doing couples counseling or family counseling, we kind of need the couch.
Maybe you need a couch
to get enough butts under there. There is a certain functionality to it.
Or not a couch. What are the things, an ottoman or whatever they're like laying down on, all that kind of stuff that you see on TV.
Yeah, well, most of them were ottomans or fainting what they call fainting couches, but it's like there's just some
But yeah, I mean, I love and also like how to way to really increase the access to that also through telehealth. I mean, telehealth is such amazing, advent. I think because of COVID, folks have been moving online, and normalizing mental health practices through the screen, right? So that makes it, I think, a lot more accessible for folks instead of having to travel somewhere, but they can just take it online or take it through the internet, which has also been amazing too. So we're a strong advocate and component of making, any and all ways that folks can see someone, talk to someone, work.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a perfect place for us to take a break. So stay tuned for our second half here on Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with Brain Ragas, administrator extraordinaire from San Franscisco, Black Brothers Esteem. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be back shortly.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
Where can you listen to some of the world's top life coaches ready to dish out success tips and entrepreneurial guidance? The Voice America Empowerment Channel will do just that. Whether it's personal growth, building a better business, or inspirational life stories, make it a daily habit to tune into our programs. From weight loss and personal branding to law of attraction and increased happiness, you'll find it every day at VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com. The Voice America Empowerment Channel. It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed.
Our lives and the world around us can get messy and frustrating. Untangle and Grow Counseling's focus is to untangle that mess and make sense of it so you have a good foundation to build and grow from. Visit us on the web at untangleandgrowcounseling.com. Perry Clark offers individual psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, and adolescence therapy from a variety of coping materials and resources. Visit untangleandgrowcounseling.com for more information.
Live up to your fullest potential. This is the Voice America Empowerment Channel.
You are listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. If you have a question or comment about our podcast, send an email to pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. That's pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. And now, back to the program.
Hello all, welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with Brain Ragas, administrator of Black Brothers Esteem, part of the SFA Foundation, and UCSF, am I correctly?
No, it's SFAF. San Francisco AIDS Foundation. It's San Francisco AIDS Foundation. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I know at times those two agencies sometimes work together. So
we do, but this is all us.
Yeah. So we've been talking a bit much about the program that you work for, you're administrating, which is Black Brothers Esteem, which provides a lot of community supports to Black queer men. One of those other things that, especially with everything that's happened with the recent effects of COVID and so forth, has also seen issues around gentrification and how cities demographics have shifted.
Yes. Yeah. And so, I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, we're just seeing a really slow decline of Black folks in the city. And so I think part of what we want to do, or what we are doing, is how to maintain, space in San Francisco for Black folks, for Black queer folks, right? That's relevant and, to us, and you see some of it is shifted that. I think one thing about gentrification and one thing about what's interesting thing about capitalism is that it's always profitable to be woke for some reason, or it's more recently profitable to be woke. So I think you'll see businesses and support things for Black Lives Matter, or supporting Black initiatives in the city. But I still have to really question, is this really supporting folks in the community here in the city, right? As an example, there is I don't know, you see the Black Power fist a lot in spaces, particularly in the Castro. And there's this one spot that I know for sure, I'm not going to call it out their name, but they're a gym, and it's in the Castro, and then they're actively against homeless and marginally homeless folks in the Castro, right? They're part of the Castro. I'll call this out. They're on the Castro Merchants Association, who is actually actively against homeless folks in the Castro, and they are completely not cool. But yet they'll show face and have a Black Power fist on their window. So as an example, so I was like, okay, thank you. We see that, but you're actually actively taking away the needs of the community by being anti-homeless, particularly in the Castro. So it's just politics. It's it's messy, but we have to call things out when we see it, and I think that's also part of the work that we do here. It's hey, what's really going on here, and are you actually serving the community, in that sense, right?
Well, especially given that I'm sure there's ways that they're rationalizing this under that sort of siloed image, as opposed to recognizing the intersection of identities as well.
Yeah.
Not to mention just being performative as opposed to impactful.
No, exactly. And so, as we see the high cost of living in San Francisco and the Bay Area, part of our program is really looking and searching to find options for folks, to live and stay here, right? And so that's why we have housing programs, housing referrals. We have this pipeline for folks getting into public health, and it's the workforce. So we're really trying to give people options to have a sustainable life here, which is hard. It's hard. We give No, I was gonna say another option we give so much travel um assistance as well too
Hmm.
to folks, so any and all kind of assistance that we can to make it, easy to live here, we do and try.
Gotcha. So, with that aspect of the gentrification that's coming on, one question would be, I mean, I know there's still plenty of forces trying to hold on to the Castro, but do you see any other areas in San Francisco that are possibly going to be migrating change and might be safe places, not just for queer, but also Black and queer?
Yeah. So, I mean, most of the communities that we work here and where we try to target is actually, the Tenderloin and the Soma, and a
Hmm.
little bit of the Bayview too. That's because our offices are located right here
Hmm.
right at the crux of Soma and Tenderloin. But,
Hmm.
the communities here are just so beautiful and like resilient. I think in terms of we how you create life here, right? You know,
Hmm.
there is always this negative stigma on these neighborhoods of being infested with crime, substance users, drug paraphernalia. But at the same
Hmm.
time, these are people's homes and people live here. People have to walk these streets on the day to day, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's just really, really beautiful how people will just really create life here. And often than not, the folks on the streets are a lot nicer than people in these rich white neighborhoods that you'll probably ever find and see. The folks are down to have a conversation. Folks are actually treat you with a lot of respect, actually. And they look at you, and they're just going about their days, normally, right? They're just trying to, get by, right? And so, I think what we're trying to do is, really give people dignity, and respect, and just like I said, how to have life here, right?
Hmm.
And as we talked about earlier, it's in gentrification, it's only intensified, I think, in the last several years, on the amount of homelessness and that's been happening here in the Tenderloin and Soma areas, because that's like the focal point of where folks are and can meet, right? It's the
Hmm.
crux of transportation. It's the crux of a lot of the service providers that are here. Um, and it's kind of the crux of life for like low income folks here. So
Hmm.
I think it's a beautiful struggle. I think that we really try to work with over here.
Lovely. And it takes actually seeing more of the humanity as opposed to what's in your pocketbook.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you'll see some crazy memes. Like
Hmm.
I'm sure you've seen them, like about how there's these luxury, hotels, luxury apartments right next door to like these encampments, right? And we're
Hmm.
talking about like these, economic divides, and you're seeing it right here, right?
Hmm.
Or you'll see like these nice, beautiful curbside parks, and there's like a homeless person just sleeping right next door, So, these are the realities that we live in. These are the class divides that, it's that we live in, in this, highest form of capitalism that we like live in San Francisco, and like one of the most, expensive places in the world to live, right?
Which
But
also brings,
uh,
which always brings back to that aspect of, yeah, you could gentrify the entire city, but are there really going to be enough people with enough jobs to pay for that entire city?
yeah,
And especially to keep all the services that need to run for
yeah.
said city.
Yeah,
I
you're
mean,
seeing a lot. Yeah, you're seeing a lot of tech flight, getting out of here, right? Market
hmm.
Market Street is kind of destitute in terms of like the businesses. Businesses are pulling out left and right. Um, like Westfield Mall is closing. All the storefront closes are closing
Hmm.
just because, yeah, they can't find a market here for that, or it's too expensive, you know. So,
Hmm.
yeah, the city is really, really, really changing.
And all of that very much hits the Black queer community.
Yes, yeah, exactly, exactly. We face the brunt of it in a lot of ways.
Hmm. Both saddening, infuriating, and just,
But I think there's a lot of great triumphs out of that as well too.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of that to address another issue is how to solve the root causes of these issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it again is surrounded by the idea of recovery and health through the lens of harm reduction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is like one of the strongest holds, or one of the strongest birthplaces of the harm reductionist movement, right? Because we have so much substance use here, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so actually, I don't think we should take credit because there's a lot that's been happening in New York and Toronto. I mean, in Vancouver, actually, right? Who actually opened up, a lot of their safe consumption sites a lot sooner
Mm-hmm.
than ours. But we're working on that as well too in the city. So,
Well, especially given the problem with fentanyl that's been happening too.
Yeah. So hopefully those become like realities as we allow folks to get around this idea of what harm reduction is and what it looks like and how it helps really self-support our communities, right? So, folks, struggling with addiction, it's difficult, right? I mean, you're a mental health provider. I mean, I mean, maybe you should know about the behavioral change and, particularly how difficult that is. But what's particularly when you add addictive substances to that, like fentanyl, and other street drugs that we're seeing, it's even more difficult, right? To change that. And so, we come with the lens that, we meet where people where they at, that, it's okay to let them slide, a little bit. And it's actually okay to use a little bit as long as, we are creating healthy pathways of controlling the usage and help reducing the harm that's impacted by these drugs, right? So that's why we have needle exchanges, clean equipment for things to use so it doesn't help spread HIV and Hep C, things like that. So because folks are going to do it anyway on the streets, so we provide, clean alternative usages for that, right? But then at the same time, we offer counseling that's available, as well as medicated treatment assistance, right, Matt, right? As an option as well too for folks, right? So, so it's a whole. I mean, this is the whole conversation around substance use and usage and getting things over. Also on top of trying to work with folks who are homeless and marginally housed, right? So a lot of the time their needs aren't getting medicated MAT, right, or medicated assisted treatments, but it's just finding a place to sleep or getting a meal, right? Those are trying to meet basic needs first, but then
depending on how people are experiencing that is trauma. And frankly, from the mental health side, a lot of times it's trauma that causes people to seek the drugs to try and escape the experiences. And I mean, just as much as we're still seeing the problem, especially in the queer community, whether no matter who it is, issue with crystal meth too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, certainly again, you brought in again the intersectional element of the Black, queer, and trans folks that we see, right? So a lot of the trans and gender non-conforming folks that we work with, also suffer through different levels of substance use, have history with sex work, and it's really hard to get by out here, right? And so they find all these ways to cope with some of the situations that we have to live with, right?
Very much so. So I think we actually hit the myths and realities from mental health question earlier on. Let me ask a slightly different one since there. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that you are both Black and API. So I'm kind of curious about, and especially for those others who have been forced to live with that sort of, you need to pick one camp or another. I'm kind of wondering what it's been like for you, and especially representing that. Not speaking for the community, but just for yourself and your own experience. Yeah. Because you started a bunch of this work with API, and now here you are working with Black Brothers Esteem too. So kind of curious about that.
Well, I think fortunately, again, going back to my ethnic studies background, that I was fortunate to take comparative ethnic studies and learn both of like my cultures, right? Both learned back at my Filipino side and then through Africana studies, learned through my African and African American side histories. And I was actually fortunate enough to take a mixed race studies class as well too. So I learned all of my identities very early on.
Again, not a class that often gets talked about. It's usually, again, siloed into one or the other.
Yeah. So I very appreciate that. My background and our university at San Francisco State, had these programs, right? And I think it was just interesting growing up because I was looking at my parents and they never forced like any cultural identity like kind of on me growing up, but I had to do a lot of like reclaiming as well too. I think in that sense, right? Because my dad is actually second generation Filipino, very Americanized growing up, and I didn't know what it meant to be Filipino. So I think that's why I quickly gravitated to that early on, and I was able to go to school at San Francisco State, live in Daly City of all places, right? The highest concentration of Filipinos outside of the Philippines, right? So I got to integrate very much well, I think, within that community space, and learn what it means for me to be, Filipino, right? At the same time, my mom and my other side of the family grew up, mostly Creole, right? And African American. And so, we did some more cultural things growing up, right? We went to like Zydeco festivals, and learned all that. And, and I think, African American culture is a little more proliferated, within the popular cultural lexicon, all that kind of stuff, right? So, I had a little more access to that, growing up, but I think I had a more deep dive, in my ethnic studies process, right? But I've always tried to balance both, I think, for myself. So even when I was growing up, living in Daly City, I still had to know what it meant to be Black and queer. And so during that time, I joined Black queer men's retreats through, I think it was called the Black Men's Exchange under Wanago under the time, right? So I had to know that sense of my identity as well too. And it was just it's an always interesting way to straddle both identities. At the same time, I never feel a complete expert at one, but more of like a jack of all trades, if that makes sense, kind of thing, and of course, phenotypically, if you look at me, I know this is an audio podcast, but I look many different things. I get mostly Latino or Pacific Islander, or something else, so I'm fairly, medium light skin. Like I'm like about paper bag, a little bit, probably above paper bag, probably right above paper bag, right? So, there's also that phenotypical side. I'm 6'3" tall too, so it's an interesting exploration to go into these multiple identities, multiple communities, and try to represent myself. But I always try to bring in the best of both worlds, in all the spaces that I'm in.
Which is one of the beauties of intersectionality, is that there's a lot of different places where we can draw strength from.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I'm very grateful.
That, and of course, one of those other little things that, as you and I have discussed, is you're also a fan of Star Trek.
I am. I think it comes from like the ideals of Star Trek. I think the basis of what Star Trek is, right? Like how we got to this level of society is that we got rid of war and poverty, and basically became a utopia on the planet, right? So if we solve our problems here on the planet, then we can get to space like relatively easy, right? Like ideally, right? In that scenario. So I love that concept of that Star Trek brings, because it's such a hopeful one, that that we can come together as humanity, right, and go to the stars. Like that's what we should be doing, we shouldn't be fighting over resources. We have abundant resources on this planet. We have renewable energy sources that we can get into, right? But, it's the greed, it's the capitalism, it's, these things that, the divisions, racial divisions that really keep us apart, when we should really be coming together. right?
Mm-hmm.
And going to space. Go to space.
And that's a perfect example.
And not through SpaceX and whatever his name is, Musk shit, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
No, not through private industry where we have to pay millions of dollars to do that. So no.
No, gotcha. But again, that brings back to the intersectionality of what it means.
Yeah.
That we live as Black queer men and API Black queer men too.
Yes.
So Brian, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. And where can folks find to help support and talk more with you if they want to get into this career, but also to support the programs?
Yeah, you can reach us through our website, sfaf.org/Black Health. Is where you'll see our programs. Just look us up through there.
All right. And we'll have a link in the bio information as well. So once again, this has been Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist. And let's keep reaching for the stars as we discover our intersectionality. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be back for more.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.